This time on Poll Hub, we're digging deep into the results of our new national survey with our partners at NPR. Why is it that so many Americans think Biden's big infrastructure law and his even bigger Build Back Better bill are good, but his approval rating is still mired at the lowest point in this presidency? We're going to look at that. Then we're taking a look back and ahead at ranked choice voting. It was used in the New York City elections this past summer in the biggest test of this process yet in the U.S. But what does the future hold for ranked choice voting? And finally, the holiday season is here, so get your credit card or Apple Pay or whatever ready. Our fun fact is all about how much Americans have spent in the past at this time of year and what they plan to do this year. So let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Marengoff.
Well, another week, another poll with our partner, NPR. This time we're taking a look again at President Biden, but in a little bit different way. Last time we were talking about the economy and how inflation has jumped up to the top of Americans' concerns about the economy. So we thought we would dive back in to see how this may be affecting him and check in on a couple of initiatives which he has been able to get through. The infrastructure bill, which is now law. And we're about on the precipice of the debate with Build Back Better. Biden's approval rating is still at 42%. Is he getting blamed for the economy here? Is he getting any credit for the initiatives that he has done? How is this all affecting how Americans view him?
I would just say off the top that the opportunity for him to have exercised the so-called bully pulpit doesn't seem to be part of what his legislative style is all about. Some have referred to him as the 51st senator. He seems to be in a deliberative mode. And as a result, the bills he's putting forward, his program actually has greater popularity than he's getting credit for. So in a sense, he's not messaging what he needs to be doing in order to get credit. In fact, his getting credit is about the same as what the Republicans in Congress are getting. And you certainly wouldn't want to be lining up there.
Yeah, you're right, Lee. I mean, there is a majority support for the infrastructure bill, now law. 56% of Americans support it, but it really isn't resonating as something that is going to impact the economic woes that I think people are feeling.
I think that the White House would disagree with one thing you said, Lee, which is that it's all because he's not doing the messaging. They would argue that the media has, much in the same way that Trump argued, the media has been kind of against the White House. But in this case, the mainstream media, especially the DC political media, has focused very, very heavily on bad news. For instance, there was 200,000 jobs gained. That was called last month. Almost uniformly, that was described as poor performance and a real slack, really bad. That same number was trumpeted when it was in the Trump administration by the same media outlets as a really great month. So I think that
big surge.
Right. I do think there is something to the White House's complaint that that everybody in the media is focusing on inflation, but not on jobs and all these other things. That being said, he's got the biggest bully pulpit in the world, so use it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think it's interesting in these numbers. We looked at the infrastructure bill, Build Back Better. We asked about the stimulus checks that were back in the summer. $1,400. Almost everybody got $1,400. Well, not almost everybody. 62% of the people in our poll said they got this $1,400 stimulus check. And of those, 53% said it helped a little. 27% said it helped a lot. So that's a lot of people. That is a big majority saying, yep, $1,400, it was great. I think we didn't ask the question, do you remember getting the $1,400?
It's a recall question.
Things happen, things that happened that long ago in this news environment vanish very quickly. So I think what we're seeing here is a narrative that has been built, by a combination of a focus by the media on one part of the economic story, the failure of the White House to talk about any other part of the economic story, and the fact that everybody's memories are really, really short.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, Jay. Come on. We did ask some other questions on the infrastructure bill and how Americans, whether they were optimistic or pessimistic about whether this was going to impact a number of different things. So would it improve bridges and roads? The word is infrastructure, and 69% of Americans are pretty optimistic that there is money in there to deal with bridges and roads. And even if it isn't that same money, we've all been in construction traffic at some point over the last month. So there's a sense that there's some movement and investment either through the state or federal level. But now, if the infrastructure bill is going to create better paying jobs, that 69% goes down to a small majority of 53% who are optimistic that it'll actually impact or improve the job picture. And then the one thing that I thought was very surprising, because inflation is the number one economic concern of Americans. Only 34% thought this infrastructure bill would have anything to do with inflation. And they may be right, but doesn't that also speak to a little bit of the messaging problem that the White House has? If this is all top of mind, shouldn't their initiatives be focused on the primary concern is?
Well, the deliberative process does, in all administrations, go a little slower. It creaks along than the news cycles. And certainly when they proposed the infrastructure, when they proposed building back better, inflation was not the concern. So in a sense, they were aiming at a target that wasn't there at the time. Having said that, I do think with the Build Back Better, I'm struck by, given that this is something he campaigned on, it's his big, flagship program, that 25% don't even have an opinion on the topic. And that includes 22% of Democrats.
I agree. I thought that was the most interesting number in our entire poll right there.
And I'll say something positive about Biden is we have to recall.
Well, no, don't go off that particular number, because I thought what was really interesting when you said, about a quarter of Americans really can't say one way or the other, whether they support or oppose Build Back Better, they don't know enough. But you mentioned 22%, that includes 22% of Democrats. What's interesting about that is that number is pretty close across Democrats, Republicans, and independents. There's actually a consensus on this lack of knowledge about what it actually means.
Yeah, I'll say, and I didn't want to interrupt you or Jay when you both said that was an interesting point I made. I was going to let you guys air it out as much as you wanted to. But I will say, when we talk about Joe Biden, we talk about his administration, first, we can't start talking about the midterm elections because there's going to be 6,000 things that happen to move numbers between now and then. But also, we have to remember that when it comes to the legislative process, he has the slimmest of majorities. In the Senate, it's 50-50. And in the House, I think he has a net 5 seats. It's really tough to move Congress when you've got this unprecedented, close number and even within the different coalitions, different parties, there's split views on those. But, he doesn't have a big crowd to work with.
Now, let's turn the corner here. We want to look back to something that we've talked about on this podcast in the past, which is ranked choice voting. Remember, we did the poll in New York City, the crazy mayoral election with 240 candidates. Well, maybe it wasn't that many, but it was a lot of candidates. And people got to choose up to five candidates in their election. Really interesting stuff. It's called ranked choice voting. New York City was the biggest test of that in the US so far. But where does it go from here? And in that poll, we worked with the folks at an advocacy organization promoting ranked choice voting called Fair Vote. And so we wanted to have them back, or somebody from there, to talk about this, to help us see what happened then and what's going to happen going forward. So Deb Otis is a senior research analyst at Fair Vote. And so she's here to help us kind of poke through this. Deb, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to join you all today. It has been a wild year for ranked choice voting. We're setting records left and right. This is definitely the fastest growing election reform in the country right now, and for good reason. Voters are seeing that we're ready for some changes.
So let's start with New York City, because that was the biggest test so far. And Maine has ranked choice voting. Other municipalities in some states do, but New York City at least was the biggest in terms of the number of people, I think, who participated or were expected to participate. What went right? What went wrong?
Well, the participation rate was great. We saw highly competitive elections, large fields of candidates throwing their hat in the ring. We love to see this in ranked choice voting. Candidates know that they can compete, they can enter the race without worrying that, if they enter the race, they might become a spoiler. They might siphon votes away from another candidate who represents a similar community. And so it opens the playing field for candidates from all sorts of backgrounds to jump in this race and connect with voters and then pick the winners that have the broadest support. So we saw large numbers of candidates. I know New York City expanded their public financing program this year. That could have contributed as well. We can't take all of the credit for RCV, but I think some of it is there. And then we saw really strong voter turnout and a strong use of rankings. When I say that, I mean voters have the chance to rank just one candidate when they go to vote, but almost everybody used multiple rankings. We're used to ranking things in our everyday lives. And it turns out when voters have that option at the ballot box, they want to use it, especially in big races like this really competitive mayor's race that you all had.
There was one criticism early on that somehow this would confuse the process, that voters wouldn't necessarily understand, because it wasn't an easy ballot. It was not only was it different, not only was it the first time, but in New York City, I know, Jay, you were up to the millions in the number of candidates that were running, but it was actually 13 candidates on the ballot, which was no small feat, not only for voters, but for those of us who had to try to tally that in our polls as well. There were some exit polls. There was a lot of folks that were trying to get a sense of whether voters were able to tackle this challenge. How did that work out?
The poll numbers look really strong, as does the ballot data when we can analyze the error rates. So in the polls, I believe 77% of voters said they like RCV, they want to keep using it. So that's more than 3/4 of voters said, yes, this was great, let's keep it. And 98% of folks said that this ballot was easy to navigate. And so this is a strong indication that, you see this ballot, it is bigger than the previous choose one ballots because you get to rank 5. But this is not intimidating and turning voters off. We are seeing more voters participate rather than less.
Yeah, I came at this as somewhat skeptical. So I'll say I thought new gimmick. Confusing. How are we going to poll it? How are the people going to know? How they're going to vote? And then I became a believer because I saw the process and it unfolded, and it was actually interesting. And in a time when we're talking about voter fraud, voter suppression, this seems to democratize voting more. What's the connection to, as Jay asked about, the way out of the partisan wars and how this might help get us sort of unstuck from where we are?
Well, ranked choice voting is great at elevating candidates that have broad appeal, so appeal to a large swath of the voters. A candidate who would struggle in ranked choice voting elections might be someone who really appeals to just one narrow base of voters and struggles to connect with folks beyond that one base. That candidate would have a harder time in RCV. And so RCV is ideologically neutral. It in itself does not promote moderate or liberal or conservative, but it promotes finding that candidate who best connects with the most voters. And that can be a very different candidate, but depending on, say, which city or which district you're talking about.
What does that mean going forward for 2022? Where are we going with this? Are there more states, new municipalities, or places that want to use it?
Absolutely. One of the things I'm excited for growth is the growth of the local options bill. So we're talking about state legislation. We have seen legislators in a couple of states embrace this path. A local options bill for ranked choice voting lets cities and towns opt in to RCV easily without having to go through a complicated review your charter process. And so this year, Utah expanded their local options program and Colorado passed one, and immediately cities started opting in. And so voters want this, legislators are hearing this from their constituents, and cities want this. cities that are holding 2 rounds of elections, like New York used to do, 2 rounds to select. Yep, you could halve your costs.
Yeah, I was really struck with the with the primary in New York City because I mean certainly we had a large number of candidates throw their hat in the ring in the past, but it was a large field. It was very significant participation. There was also a very strong, I think, marketing campaign between the city and other voting advocacy groups. To have people understand what the ballot was, and generally it was very positive in the sense that all the voters who showed up on primary day actually then participated in what would have been a runoff in New York City. They have a 40% threshold. So if one of the candidates had not reached 40%, which was very likely, there was going to need to be another election, and I thought that was something very interesting. I think it also was a very positive thing, not only for the city but for voters as a whole. Moving forward, do you see this also being something? I mean, we have a couple of states who do this at the state level, but getting to the point where we might be able to be deciding, broader elections and, presidential elections in the future.
Absolutely. And we need this kind of change, right? A number of state parties already started using ranked choice voting for presidential primary elections, and I'd love to see that expand. This happened for 5 states in 2020. And this ranked choice voting in the presidential primary is a great solution for these crowded fields of candidates that are kind of in flux. You get candidates dropping out halfway through the process, and some voter has cast a mail-in ballot for a candidate who then drops out before election day. Ranked choice voting, makes sure that that voter still has a say in it. They should still be able to choose and have their vote count among the active candidates. So 5 states did it this past cycle, and we would really like to double that or more for 2024 presidential cycle.
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that I expected some of the candidates to try to game the system a little bit more. There was some kind of like peripheral attempts to do that and, vote for me and then vote for so-and-so as second choice. But I don't think any of that stuck. I think voters picked the candidates they wanted and ranked them. In the interest of transparency, you guys are getting, better known and all that. Can you just tell our folks a little bit about the organization? You are an advocacy organization. So, where's the support? How big are you? What is some of your infrastructure, in the word that's used today?
Sure. So Fair Vote has been around for about 30 years now, and we have been working on election reform that whole time. For the last several years, our key area of reform is ranked choice voting and proportional ranked choice voting. And our organization, we're based in the DC area, and we are about 25 employees. We're a nonprofit organization. We receive our funding from a variety of sources, including good government groups that fund a number of initiatives to help, say, improve election transparency and election processes.
If you were to look ahead and kind of forecast the future, is this the future of voting in the U.S.? I mean, are there enough traditionalists? Is there enough kind of stubbornness within the party structure, the 2-party structure, that will potentially prevent this from growing beyond what it is now, which is a really cool but somewhat niche kind of voting product, if you will?
I do see continued growth for this. Ranked choice voting sounds new and different the first time someone hears about it, but what we overwhelmingly find is once someone has used it, they love it. And the second time someone hears about it, they've processed it for a second and they're thinking, oh, this is a great idea. And so we're seeing increased support from elected officials and party insiders. The folks who are in power are understanding that this is a way that they can help, clear out some of the toxicity in our campaign cycle, to help clear some legislative red tape so they could take office and actually start getting things done. So I do see absolutely this continuing to grow.
And if New York City Board of Elections can do this, I think that's a very positive statement for everyone else going forward.
Deb Otis from Fair Vote, thanks so much. We're going to put information about the organization in our show notes so people can follow it up. And who knows, maybe we'll probably work with you again the next time there's a ranked choice voting election in New York, because we need your help to make polling work in that case, especially if there's another 13 candidate election we have to deal with.
We would love to work with you again. Thanks for having me on today. Great to talk with all of you.
Well, if anybody checked the calendar lately, this fun fact has to do with the holiday season, and that is fast approaching. I think in some ways, the last year or two, it's gone very slowly, and all of a sudden we're into warp speed when we look at the calendar. It's already December. Who told me that? It's almost Christmas. So the question becomes, what are people's spending practices likely to be this Christmas? Gallup did some polling on this. We can compare it to 2010, where they also did some polling. And I first of all, the people who expect to spend $1,000 or more, 33%. People between 500 and 1,000 are 24%, and then it falls off from there. But I was struck by the fact that you're talking 57% telling us that they're going to spend at least $500. If you go back to 2010, those numbers were significantly lower. And we're not just accounting for inflation here, but clearly people are showing some interest in this year's holiday season and are expecting to spend more. And I think this may have to do with us kind of like a post-pandemic high out there. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think everything got put on hold last year in 2020. And although, many of us, particularly those of us who, live in more urban areas, are still being cautious, I think you're right. I think there's a sense of optimism and a sense and a need to reconnect with folks, friends, and family that perhaps we haven't seen in a while. I know that was the case for Thanksgiving, where many of our students were traveling far and wide to connect with cousins and relatives that they hadn't seen in a year or two. So that is probably, besides the fact that, as you mentioned, everything is certainly more expensive, but I think that was taken into account in the poll. But there is some optimism there.
I do think some of this is inflation, but from 2010 to 2021, the inflation, especially in a lot of like consumer electronics goods and things like that, have actually not. I mean, a flat screen TV is less expensive now than it was in 2010 for a similar thing.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me here was partly that top number. You're right, Lee. From the $500 and more, it grew a lot. But look at under 100. Back in 2010, 13% of people said, "Yeah, I'm going to spend under $100." Yeah, I mean, you could, maybe you live alone and you're spending it on yourself. I don't know. But under $100, 13%, that's a lot of people spending a little amount of money. This year, it's 2%. I mean, that one really struck me as well, is that the people who, in general, have spent relatively little, at least in that 2010 poll, it looks like they're in the game. They're going to spend some cash.
Some kind of celebratory mood out there. I just hope, let's get to the point here. I just hope that the people who generally give me presents are in that high spending group as opposed to the low spending group. I want to send a word far and wide right now to that effect.
There isn't a category here, Barb, for under $25, so they can't capture the two of us, can they?
And here I thought you were going to have the Christmas spirit, Lee. Don't forget to give presents and to think about gifts to your favorite charities as well. But I guess charity begins at home, right?
Well, I will say the best thing that happens on Marist College campus is the giving tree. And if anybody at Marist knows, if you go into the
which
chapel,
was started by a student.
Because if you go into the chapel right before Christmas, you will see a pile of presents to folks. So I think that is where the charity is around here. So right you are.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And there are trees all around campus, and the ornaments are gifts that each staff person or student picks out for someone in need for the holiday season. And some of them are practical and some of them are fun. But we do as a community collect a lot of items and enjoy the giving spirit of the season.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Ashley Marcinek and Marcello Bettman.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review. Positive reviews help other like-minded listeners find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have any questions, tweet them at us at Marist Poll. Finally, however, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.